Bueno, welcome to the South Star Classroom, everybody. What are we at episode 167? That is nuts, man. Welcome. We are culminating the year, ladies and gentlemen, in this episode of the South Star Classroom. We've got an incredible topic, but as always, we want to introduce our co-hosts. I am Omar Yanar. With us, as always, are the majestic, the amazing, the incomparable group of educators here on the show. And as always, as a Texan, ladies first, we want to check in and say hello to first our Queen Jubilee Ransom. How's it going, Jubilee?
I'm so damn tired.
The sentiment of the masses.
It was a great day. I've been having a great time. I'm just tired. And after this show, I'm gonna go get some pasta. Some I don't know, some scampi or some zafferano or something.
One time for carbs. Shout out to
carbs. 2 times for carbs, 9 all the times for carbs. But yeah, I'm doing great. I feel quite rejuvenated, even though I'm tired. It's just been a long day. But I'm excited about the holidays and Christmas and being with my kids and just celebrating. It's been a heck of a year. So I'm really standing in gratitude and grateful to be here and to be able to embrace family, friends, loved ones, and get some well-needed rest over the next couple of weeks. So,
right on. Good to hear from you. I feel like most people are in the sentiment of the holidays. We got the beard of knowledge with us, Mr. David Castillo. How you feeling, brother?
I am good. I'm tired as well. Looking forward to some downtime. We are in the home stretch now. Home stretch on the home front with finals. So my son's taking his finals this week, helping him study for all that. And I know he's tired too. So they end the semester here this week. So it's a clean break. Come back in January for semester 2. And yeah, it's still, there was a tornado in California. Y'all heard a couple days ago. It was not in my part of California.
What part of California was there a tornado? I did not hear about this.
It was in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz.
Yeah. Where's Santa Cruz?
Yeah, it's crazy. But down here, it's still, I think today we peaked out at like 80 degrees, and you would never know. You would never know.
Damn.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. That is crazy. Tornadoes in California, man. I never thought I'd see the day.
It was a tsunami warning too, wasn't it?
Oh, we had that too.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, on the West Coast, it would be tsunami. With the way, that's why you don't get hurricanes, but they can do a tsunami. But
we got the real Dr. Charles Cole with us today, ladies and gentlemen. How you feeling, Doc?
Man, I'm actually in excruciating pain. I had to go to Bill's neck of the woods. So remember, I had that. So there's a dental procedure. It's in parts. So we did the first part with the root canal, and then they had to do this cutting under the gum thing because I wanted to be conservative and good about it. So that was a whole different procedure. It hurts. It hurts a lot. The opioid crisis has made it so you can't have real pain meds. So this little Motrin 800 or whatever they got is this. My pain laughs at it, but I might have to put some gauze in, man. But I'm happy to be here. I think we all limping into the holiday season. I mean, things are great. I'm blessed, and I'm looking forward to this topic, man. I plan on having fun with this, and it's good to see everybody. And I hope we have some good, lively, spirited debate. Like I want that to happen. Like get the people what they want, man. Like I'm looking forward to it, especially on this topic. I'm ready for. I know Brooks. I read David Brooks, and I think it's interesting.
I mean, I enjoy the give the people what they want, man. And I think what the people want is
I just produce shows, man. I get the feedback. I get, it's all good. I love it because I didn't mean to cut you off, but I am excited about this huge topic. So
it is a massive topic, man. Because of course, on the times that I host, I can't keep it simple, for God's sakes, man. I got to make it overly complicated. We'll get into that in a second. I just want to tell our audience, thank you for joining us for 167 episodes. Thank you for being with us. We love hearing from you. So continue to chime in, continue to give, healthy commentary. And just as a quick aside to our audience, I want to say that, like, Jon Stewart put it very, very best when he was hosting The Daily Show and was asked by, at the time, Bill O'Reilly, like, hey, man, like, what is your stake in the news? Like, you're sitting here criticizing us, at Crossfire and at Fox News as to, like, our bit of news, and, like, what are you doing? And his comment was very simple. He's like, dude, I'm a comedian, and our show is followed by puppets that do things to themselves, talking puppets. I didn't want to give the exact.
We watch
quote.
A lot of the same things, Omar, because that is like
exactly,
deep,
man.
Deep, like over a decade ago cut. So that's when
it is a huge cut. And I want to just remind our audience that while I would easily say that the four of us are experts on education, when we start diving into other topics, it's really to promote discussion. I don't think any of us are purporting ourselves to be experts on some of these topics that we engross ourselves into. It's really to create conversation, the spirit of debate, and then to have people think about something that they may not have thought about before. Because ironically, I was scanning through stuff on our last show, which was like a huge topic about healthcare, and it was pretty sensitive. And an old friend of mine just decided to, like, lambast the show and lambast the commentary. It was like, this is all emotional garbage, and what are you doing?
I love it.
And I loved it too, because I was like, hey man, A, thanks for watching. B, maybe you should call Oscar Wilde and ask him what the definition of irony is, considering all you did was lambast and share emotional outrage instead of adding something of value to the commentary. And I do ask that of our audience. Like, if you know better than us, dude, like, bring it into the comments, like, share with us afterwards. We'd love to learn with you because we are lifelong learners. But this is a show to promote, entertain, to think, and to get our audience thinking about things that they may not have thought about. And this is the spirit of which we do the show, much like Jon Stewart talked about the spirit of The Daily Show. There may be some, like, interesting news content, but they're a comedy show. We are a show to provoke thought and to teach as best as we can. And when we don't know all the answers, we ask our audience to help chime us in. So with that being said, we are going to launch into this episode, and geez, we got a doozy for you folks in terms of what we are talking about today. So you look at the title. The title of the show is How the Ivy League Broke the American Dream. And you may be wondering, where the hell is this coming from? So I'm going to do the breakdown. And as always, we're going to get our incredible co-hosts to chime in. Why did I think about this topic? One, there's a very famous author named David Brooks, wrote a number of books, his most famous probably being The Social Animal, about essentially the behavior of humans and the behavior of humans, particularly in the concepts of how things work in the United States. After this election that we saw in 2024, we saw this very interesting divide and shift that we even talked about on the show, which was you had this enormous divide between those people who have a college education, vote for the Democratic Party, and those that did not vote for the Republican Party. And within that very radical divide, I think there was a lot of people blaming each other and fighting. On, the Republican side, well, this is what happens when the elites are in charge, which is a shocking sentiment, because I don't think that the Democratic Party has ever been labeled as the party of the elites. Certainly didn't start that way. I think with the reformation of the Democratic Party right around the time of, like, Woodrow Wilson, despite the fact that the guy was president of Princeton, so it would make some sense, and FDR, went to Harvard. But those cats were really about using the presidency as a vehicle to promote the greater good of the public, particularly the middle class. And since then, the Democratic Party has really been one of the working class. We saw a seismic shift in this past election where the Democratic Party became the party of the elites, those who were college educated, and the Republican Party basically saying, you have ruined the country. And then on the left, all these quote elites saying, well, if you were educated, you would know better. And it created an enormous blame game. So David Brooks wrote an article for The Atlantic talking about, well, where did this come from? Like, where did this idea of college elites come from? How did we even get into this process and this discussion? So to break it down simply, it's a fascinating article. I hope we share it with everybody online because it is truly an incredible piece of literature. The article is titled "How the Ivy League Broke America," and his thesis, right? Like his argument is, all right, check this out. See, back in the 1930s and the 1940s, the only people that got into these elite colleges were rich people. See, basically, if you were the son or daughter, you were going to somewhere like Radcliffe, the female version of Harvard, right? Or Barnard, which was the female version of Columbia, because at the time, those colleges were in fact segregated by gender. If you're rich and mostly men, you would get shuffled in to one of these Ivy League schools, right? The Harvards, the Princetons, the Yales. And it was just expected that this was part of your grooming. They would essentially pay for your way in. It wouldn't matter if you studied or not. It wouldn't matter what your grades were. It was basically a formality to go to one of these prestigious locations and then ultimately unfold as like a Harvard man or a Princeton man, and then take your place at, you know, a prestigious company. And in the 1950s and the 1960s, Harvard specifically decided to think about who they were letting into their colleges with an experiment. And they were saying, look, we're letting all these like rich kids in, and this isn't fair because I don't think that these people represent the most intelligent and effective people in America. What if we created a meritocracy program? What if we ran an experiment where we figured out a way to get the smartest kids in the country, arguably the world, to come to the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Yales and the Princetons? And yeah, definitively white, Toya. That's exactly right. Except for Soul Man, who is also white. That came up in conversation recently. But the idea was like, what if we developed a system to get these really smart kids into these colleges, and then we would have pooled together the smartest kids in the country, educated them at the highest levels of American university systems, and then disseminated them into the country. Like, wouldn't this be utopia? Wouldn't this be a better world? And bear in mind, you're talking about the 1950s and 60s, people coming back from World War II, people talking about the American dream, Kennedy talking about the space program and asking not what you can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So this was a time really of thinking about the country and the world in very different ways and changing paradigms. So they developed essentially the modern day meritocracy system of education. And it was based pretty much on IQ, how smart you were, on your SAT scores, how well you did, on your grades, how well did you do within this school system. And really, we are still living with that meritocracy system today. After now it has been, 70, 60 years, we are in this very interesting scenario where we just saw what happened in the election. We're in this scenario where they're finding out that a lot of these people that went to these schools, instead of becoming a public servant, like all four of us did, instead of getting into public service and getting into civic leadership, which basically means like your city government, your state government, your federal government, and working towards others, they all started going and working in their own self-interest, meaning like, screw leadership. I'm going to go make boatloads of money in finance. I'm going to go make boatloads of money in real estate. I'm going to make boatloads of money in tech and in consulting. And as a result, instead of this intelligentsia coming in and solving the critical problems of the country, they really kind of went in and started solving critical issues of their own self-indulgence and their self-interest. In addition to that, what they found is, well, this work, like, is IQ or SAT scores really an indication of the smartest people in the country? Because as we have grown as a nation, things like emotional intelligence, resilience, dexterity, adaptability are demonstrating significantly higher levels of what is essentially effectiveness, both in life and in the workplace, than some of these things that we thought about, like IQ and grades. So the system is essentially tumbling on itself, which is saying this old system of meritocracy, it doesn't work. And we ran a good experiment and it didn't work the way we wanted it to. We need something new where we're incorporating totally different value systems for effectiveness, which we've talked about on the show, to basically say, what if we started using different things? And that got me thinking about the conversations we've had for 167 shows about reforming education and what are things that we need to incorporate in education that are different than just taking a standardized test or getting good grades. So that is what this article talks about. And it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, man, like, we don't have all the answers, but we got a cool little magic wand that we could wave right now and say, okay, if we were to replace this current meritocracy system, what would we replace it with? But I just want to first pause, take a step, and give a moment for our cohorts just to kind of comment on the intensity of this article, and it basically saying, hey, man, what do you think about this meritocracy system? Has it worked? And as a result of the consequences, where are we at right now? So I'll leave it to our co-hosts. Not all at once, gentlemen.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. Yeah, so the article is definitely intense, definitely heavy, but I agree with you. It's stuff that we have never like taken on the entirety of this topic in one show, but we've like taken like little bits and pieces of it and addressed it in a number of former shows that we have. I think, based on what I read in the article and, my experience and kind of what we see happening is the current system is designed to do exactly what it's doing, right? If you look at colleges and universities and graduation rates by demographic and, earning data, right? Earning data, home ownership data, at least via education systems. And I do agree there is some element of like leveling the playing field happening for young people of color, right, that are entering into this system, this college and university system. But for the most part, I think it just reinforces and it continues to grow the inequities that we see, right? I think you nailed it on the head. At one point, maybe by design, this system was supposed to generate different outcomes, meaning like, why aren't people going into education? Why aren't people going into civil service? Why aren't people going into public service, right? But in this kind of system that we live in, a capitalist system, that's what people are going to gravitate towards that, right? And so people go towards those fields that will bring them more money in a much shorter time frame. I think, it's not necessarily mentioned in here, but, there are many countries and, when we have a draft, right? We draft everyone to serve in the military, right? but like, what would it look like to, we're getting into solutions, but one thing I just thought about was like, what would it look like to have a requirement, a 1 year requirement for some kind of public service, right? If you're the recipient of some kind of aid money from the government, right? You have to do at least 1 year of like public service, right? Because sometimes you have to like force the issue. But people would probably rather intern at a consulting firm than go and serve in some kind of
man.
public.
And I think like AmeriCorps kind of tried to do some of that. The Peace Corps tried to do some of that. They still exist. Even Teach for America is like, hey man, jump into the teaching world for 2 years as a public service before you become a consultant. So we're definitively seeing more of that, which is awesome. But you're right, David. It's like, hey man, let me jump into McKinsey. Let me jump into Bain. Let me jump into all of these other components. That's really about making money. And I got to comment just that, like, with the meritocracy system, dude, you've seen it. I've seen it. Doc's seen it. Jubilee system seen it. It's become a game. So how do I get my kid into Kumon math and SAT prep starting in 6th grade so that they whiz the SAT? How do I hire an expert who understands college admissions really well to guide me through the college admissions process so that I can game this thing, versus like, are we finding the best of the best?
Jubilee,
you know what I'm saying?
Yield to our matriarch. If she wants, you can pass or not, but
how do we find the best of the best? Who is the best of the best? Like, how are we defining like all of these things? That's what always gives me pause with all of these crises. And that's just my lingering question. It's like, and I know we'll get into other questions, but this system, Toya put in the chat, and white, right? And I'm like, yeah, white men. This is who was already, identified as having the chutzpah or whatever was needed to be the most successful and to have what it takes. So it was not a system that was designed to accommodate the all, So that's my initial thought.
What's the actual? So the question that I'm answering is it about Brooks's article? Is it about meritocracy? Like, what's the question?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's fun and it's open, man. But if you need a definitive kind of question, what we're talking about right now is just your assessment of this meritocracy system that David Brooks talks about and how you feel it's worked out for the United States.
Yeah, I would just say this. I think, let's look at Harvard, right? I mean, you went to Harvard. I think he's kind of talking about Harvard a lot in here. Like, and for the record, Harvard is mostly women, mostly white women. I would say this. So one, David Brooks's article. I like Brooks. I think Brooks comes from an interesting place. Brooks also went to an elite college. He went to the University of Chicago, and he wrote, actually, this came after he wrote about when Chicago changed their meritocracy kind of practices, and he's waiting to see if that's going to pay off. I think, but I'm not going to front. Like, I'm not mad at somebody going to get bread. Like, if you going to go, if they're not going to do that at that school, a lot of people, they want to be able to do what they want. McKinsey's going to recruit from them. Google's going to recruit from them. Like, people are going to recruit from what is supposed to be the standard. I'm trying to think about this critically and not emotionally. I do think that there's a ton of flaws in a meritocracy, but I do think there needs to be I think it needs to be redefined, right? Like, how do you, so as opposed to maybe who has the most innate knowledge that's kind of based in like, a white structure or whatever. And I don't, whatever, but it's like, okay, how do you put in how hard somebody will work into that structure? How do you add that in, kind of piggybacking off of what Jubilee said? I do agree there, but I do think you need elite colleges too. I think that there's like something to be said that if this college is the best of the best, like it's supposed to produce this, if you're looking at a global standpoint, I think it could have more of our faces, but I do think that there's some work to be had. But I'm not, let's have some, I went to nothing but state schools. I went to Cal State Hayward and San Francisco State is where my master's and my doctorate is from. When people see that, like they see the degree, but it's like, oh, it's a state school. You go to Harvard. When you see Harvard on a resume, when you see Harvard, people get access. And there's a ton of Harvard people or Ivy League people or Stanford people in education. trust me. Trust me, right? Like they have these things where people do kind of go in and they do that. But I do think you have to upgrade or update what this is. But there should be some kind of standard, because as much research as I've done on grade inflation across this country, you have to have multiple measures that actually measure similar things. And I think that the current standardized test may not necessarily be the answer, but what is the standardized way in which we are saying, hey, are you good at X? Like if you want to be a doctor, you got to take MCATs. You got to go and you got to pass med school. You have to, there are things that has to happen. And, you know, so we can have a deeper conversation on it, but that's my general, it was a big question. So I don't want to overtalk it as I've already done it.
Yeah, no, look, we're living in a system, right, where it's basically saying the better you do on your SATs, the better that you do in school, the better the essays, the better that you understand this, the better college you're going to go to. And that has a lot to do with like knowing the system, an immense amount of privilege, an immense amount of, you know, either getting scholarships or in many instances, like being able to afford some of these places. And you said it really well, Doc, where it's like, oh, hey, the connotation of someone who went to Stanford and Harvard is different than the connotation of someone who went to these schools. And I think what David Brooks is saying is that, like, that's fucked. Because all of a sudden, what we've done is created this thought train of, if you went to these schools, you're the best and brightest, and you're marginalizing everyone else. And not only that, but you're not even allowing for all these other forms of incredible intelligence and success to come into the fold. And like every single one of you is a perfect example of all those other intelligences, right? Like Doc, you've talked about 1,000 times on the show, like, hey man, like he was homeless. Hey man, like I had to struggle to get things through. Hey man, I had to take a bus to get from one school to the other in Oakland every single day. You know, David went through, you know, his tribulations, Jubilee went through hers. And I think it's wrong to simply say that you are the summation of where you went to school. I think your experiences speak infinitely more about how intelligent you are and your success rate. But as a country, we have said this was the system of meritocracy. You got to do well in these facets of grades and SATs, and this is an IQ, and that's a measure of how successful you're going to be. And therefore, we're going to use it as a system to get kids into the best colleges. That is still the system. And I think the big question on the show is, do we think that system actually works? Do we think that system is full of shit? I know how everyone feels about it, but I think the question really is, if the system is full of shit, what should we do about it? And how do we implement that into schools? That's really the big question of the show today. It's big. It's a big ass topic.
Look, but a lot of people did. I mean, I want to be a little fair, right? Like, and I'm not about to cape for an elite system that I don't necessarily get the benefit from, but I want to be critical about it. But I want to be critical about it, right? Because a lot of Ivy and elites did try to get rid of standardized tests. They did try to get rid of like the SAT. The SAT went away in a lot of places, and you know what happened? Fucking pandemonium. The drop in quality. We need MIT to be the world's leader in math production and all those things. And professors started quitting because they're like, look, physics has not changed. Like, I'm not succumbing to this, right? So there should be levels and tiers of school. I like,
yeah,
look,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Sometimes we like overcorrect, right? Like, yeah. I don't love meritocracy, but it's just like, I'm not saying that I don't think we necessarily should ban it. I think it has its place. I think the problem comes, one, because it's automatically creates this exclusivity, right? It's not all inclusive. It's not made with a lens designed to see all people from all different entry points, right? So it already has like a wall, built up. And the problem for me becomes when it's the sole measure, right? Let's talk about like gifted and talented. I hate even saying it because I'm like, who's gifted and talented? Then what do they put in front of the children? An OSAT test, which we know already is biased. It's like, oh, we're going to test your to see your IQ, to see if you can like skip a grade and go into, and it's just like,
Mhm.
yeah, but if I take that same third grader who passed on that OSAT test for gifted and talented, and then gave them an end of year third grade test because they're so brilliant that they should have already mastered all this, and they flunk, then what? Is it a true measure, right, of what their capability is, right? And then I wrote down the definition. There's a couple of definitions, right? So I guess we probably need to decide which one we want to use, but meritocracy is the holding of power by people selected on the basis of their ability, right? Then there's the breakdown. The merio is meaning earns in the Latin breakdown, and cracy, the suffix meaning power or rule, right? So it's like earning power or rule through what, right? Is it ability? Are we saying that like how are we measuring that? Right? Is it ability? Because we're all born with ability, but we're not necessarily all born with the same levels of access. So it's like, what really is the entry point to even be eligible to experience the system of meritocracy?
Yeah, I mean, what my quick take on this is the way that we have historically, measured, or colleges and universities and K-12 as well have measured what it defines as success is very narrow. We know that, right? And most of it is lives in the multiple buckets of different kinds of intelligence, cognitive intelligence, right? And so that's kind of that's where things like grades, essays, standardized test scores, SATs, all these things come into play. It's a very, very narrow cut around, evaluating somebody's whole being, right? It's incredibly narrow. There's so many other aspects or different forms of intelligence or other traits that we should be looking at measuring. And I think that's what this article is kind of suggesting, and it doesn't start, it can start in colleges and universities, because colleges and universities generally, they have the privilege of establishing criteria and benchmarks. And then the entire K-12 system has to kind of work to, align with that, right? And so, but in K-12, the kind of world which we live in, you are seeing like Omar, you partnered with the Big Picture Learning Organization. I've spent some time working in and around, my time as a Montessori head of school. We were part of the NGLC program, Next Generation Learning Challenge, where we actually got funded to explore different types of non-academic based assessments, right? Where we could start to measure things like executive functioning, right? I don't want to get into the technical pieces of it, but measuring different things that students
a little bit
measuring different things that students were doing outside of their ability to recite or process information, social emotional learning assessments, looking at collecting and recording data around the types of choices that young people were making, and having a kind of a profile of we can look at Omar's profile and we kind of know when Omar gets into conflict, he chooses these three tools to help him get out of a conflict, right? And then you can kind of start to build a profile, for you and see are you doing those things? Are you growing? Are you having less conflict? That's social emotional growth. We were very close to, we were measuring it. It was definitely in its early phase, but we realized, I think like this article calls out, that, the longer you spend time in a classroom, in a school, and as a parent, you realize, the ability for a young person to do rote memorization, right, remember particular facts about history, or do mathematical calculations without really understanding the big picture, right? Why am I doing this this type of math. Why does it matter? Well, what happened before, during, and after Mesopotamia? What's the big picture? How's it all connected? Right? We don't care about that. Like, we value the very narrow, like, do you know what happened? Do you know how to do this? Right? And can you tell it to us in a way that we can assess and judge it? It's very narrow. It's very limiting. And I think we are losing some of our best and brightest and most creative minds as a result of the system that we've created and we've all kind of bought into, right? And it's also creating a further divide between the, not necessarily financially the haves and the have-nots, but like the educated elite and the common working person on the corner. Right.
I want to, jump back in there. One, I'm proud of Jubilee. I like that you jumped in. I like that we conversing. So it's not rude. You okay? I like it. Two, I think even with what I was saying with that is just like, yeah, and I think one of our Nicole talked about it. Meritocracy isn't meritocracy right now. If you are the son or daughter of somebody, or white woman or whatever, you give a ton of money, that's not meritocracy. I think that there should be true meritocracy, and it should measure that, and it should measure like potential, right? And we should do a better job of measuring said things. But we've done shows about this, but one of the most inspiring education documents I've ever read, and if you care about this stuff, like, you should read it. It's the California Master Plan. And it was basically a plan for free education. Dave is nodding because he's familiar with it. And they broke down what this was supposed to be. So there should be different levels of universities. There should be top tiers, right? Mm-hmm. And California said private and UCs, that's where that top tier, you're going to be thinking of new ideas. You're going to carry us in the future. They're the only ones in California that can do PhD programs. Now, I have an EDD, so I did that at a state school. You can do a nurse ED. You can do PsyED, right, at other places. But the PhD has to come from either that private institution or that UC. The California state system was a little easier to get into. It's supposed to prepare you for the work environment. It's supposed to prepare you for everyday things that we need done here, and it should be more affordable. And they had a great rule when I was going. If you had over a 3.0 cumulative GPA, they didn't even look at your SAT. They didn't even look at your ACT. And if you were under at 2.0 to 3.0, then they told you what score thresholds you needed, right? So it allowed you to target. And then they built the community college system to catch everybody else. You dropped out of school, don't worry. You can come and learn how to do that here. You want to do a trade? Don't worry. You can come and do that here. The barrier to entry was taken away, and it was supposed to be the most affordable, mostly free, actually, right? So, like, that system is a beautiful system because everybody's not on the same level, and it's fine. Listen, we can have these talks around certain things, but if you're talking about, aerodynamics and putting me in a jet, I want the best of the best to be able to do that. Now, what we're talking about is like the injustice and unfairness of wrapping in monarchist type of like skills, benefits and calling it meritocracy. So I think that's where we actually agree. But I'm not going to complain that there are tiered systems. There's tiered systems and everything. Even if you try to solve for it, it will tier itself, right? So I think that's the thing to kind of catch. And I think but here's the thing though, Omar, like, I think it's super dope that you went to the Ivy. We mess with you about it or whatever the case is, but we need that. And it's a different level of education that you got there than what I got. It just is. It's a different expectation. I left my doctorate program like with a lot kind of left lustering, right? And I'm like, let me go and do this on my own. David and I write stuff together. Yeah. I'll give the drugs at Harvard are better than the drugs at California State University. There was drugs everywhere. I promise you. I can tell you some CSU, some San Jose State stories because that's where we go party at. Because they had a party. You know what? And that damn Santa Cruz. You want the best drugs? Santa Cruz got the best ones. We took students to Santa Cruz on their smokeout day. You know what smokeout day is? I had high school students. It's where they open up the campus for all the students, and the police are there to watch them. And this is before weed was legal. Like, they just get fucked up. Like, we had a high school tour there. That's Santa Cruz. That's UC Santa Cruz. But I was just making this. I just wanted to grab real life point this last real life point to hit. Because so David and I are working on this project, and there's somebody that we work with, and they got great intentions, but they want to move some things around. I'm like, listen, man, I am a dude that has a doctor, but I got diamond earrings and I have to, there are rules that I have to follow as a scholar, because it's so much easier to dismiss me and my scholarship because of where I come from and what I look like, that if I did go to Harvard, I would have a little bit more leverage. I have to constantly prove that this thing is valid and validated, so I'm not bitching about it. It's just part of the gig, but let's have the real conversation, because the system ain't gonna just shift tomorrow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think the real question is around access, not ability. If we're like, if you want to level the playing field, then make sure everybody has the same level of access to all the resources and all the great teaching and all the great curriculum and all the great exposure and all the great mentorship and all the money and all. And when we get there, then we can have a conversation about the strengthening and the development of ability. Right? This is not about ability. I think we're all born with God-given gifts, talents, and just like a diamond is a coal, a lump of coal before it becomes a diamond. We all got a lump of coal, right? And based on our, effort, based on our tenacity, perseverance, which I think we will always be comparing, apples to oranges. When you look at, as a Black person, as a Black woman, coming up, having lived, in the hood and having to understand that I didn't have to become what my zip code may have produced, right? That my come up was way different than my white female counterpart, from elsewhere who had different access, right? And so, and how do we level the playing field? Until we're able to talk about equity in terms of access points, then we will never be able to do that.
I want to really go ahead, Dave.
Again, I think Jubilee just alluded to this, that the idea of access. And so again, when our system is so focused on this, on like evaluating people's worth and value to be able to enter and access a system like higher education, based on that very narrow cut, right? Measuring cognitive intelligence. Again, we're missing out on, some of the brightest, smartest, and most creative minds. And it also makes me think of our prison systems do the same thing, right? People get locked up for decades for, having committed a crime based on a bunch of different circumstances. And then they get out and they're like labeled for the rest of their lives. And we don't really have any kind of a process to like reintegrate people that were formerly incarcerated, because we value them through this narrow cut, right? Like you committed a crime, you are a felon, and therefore like you're over there, right? Versus like you got a low SAT score, you tried to apply to our college with a 2.5 GPA, right? Your essay was substandard, and you didn't start volunteering until the 11th grade, right? So you're going over there, right? It's essentially it's tracking. It's just there are different forms of tracking people. And when you sit back and look at that data of who gets tracked where, we see the same trends that you see in like the hard standardized academic outcomes, so
yeah.
Look,
blow it all up.
I will say this. I don't know about blowing everything up, because on one end, I want to kind of give some credence to what Doc said. I want to mention what Nicole said, because Nicole really brought up a really cool idea about like, hey man, was this meritocracy system the creation of a monarchy? And I will say this, Nicole, like America is a monarchy. And if you don't realize that it is, or how it's being run, like, come on, girl, for sure. First off, like, you're rich, as Bill has, lauded into, run everything. That is not, I mean, that's not a monarchy at all. That is like an oligarchy, right? Like, we live in a very sophisticated oligarchy where the rich absolutely can control what politicians are deciding on because they're effectively paying for their reelection campaigns. This is the system that we're in. And these rich people were going to the Harvards and the Yales. So in this experiment, was this an attempt to break that oligarchy up? Yeah, it was. And it kind of did, because a lot of kids, including myself, got into these places based on a merit system of grades and scores, as opposed to my family was rich and therefore could afford to get me into these places. And in that realm, the idea was like giving credence to what Doc said. Hey, man, listen, dude, like there is a huge thing of access, and I'm with you, Jubilee. And if every kid had the opportunity to deeply have access to incredible education, I think it'd be a very different world. But like, you can't compare some of these kids to others and simply say, hey, man, this is all cool in the gang. My boy, I'll keep him nameless, who I went to high school with, showed up to the SATs drunk as shit and got like a 1490.
Oh, he's smart.
Blasted that thing.
Got it.
Exactly. Just there it is.
Nice.
And then showed up sober and got like a 1500. I'm sitting here studying my ass off. Like, that level of intelligence is incredible. Does it mean that this person has the skill set to be extremely successful in life? That is really the crux of this conversation.
Mhm.
Because while he's done some pretty badass and successful stuff, this collective body has done some extremely successful things. And I can guarantee you none of our SAT scores were as high as his.
Yeah,
And yeah,
guess
look
what?
at
Who
look at our success.
cares? Who cares?
A lot of
All
people,
the colleges, Jubilee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go.
colleges
That's not the
care.
be all end all, right?
It-
Like
It don't have to be the end up be all end all, but like I
But
work
what
hard
about
for
the
it.
show?
measure. That's
It's
me.
one,
I ain't
it's
gonna
one
look at
measure. That's it, but
somebody.
it's only
I
one
don't
measure.
care.
It's only one
It's
measure.
one measure, and I'm not gonna be wild because somebody's like, "Oh my God, you got a 1400,
But if
1500."
that's what you ask for, listen. If that's what you're at, if that's what that group is asking for, and they're saying
Mhm.
you got to prove this, and this is the thing.
Mhm.
That's why certain
Mhm.
parents spend everything they can and get Kumon and get that
Listen.
stuff. But that's what if that's what you tell people what the rules are, you can't be mad that they rock.
I'm not mad. I'm just saying that's not something. Now, is it something that hey, round of applause, great job. I'm just saying it's one measure, right? And
And a ton of people with like 1600s don't get into
And
that
it is-
school.
God
And
bless
it is
them.
and it's a measure that has
negotiate and
massive
get a
impact.
hostage? Can you get hostages returned by your through your negotiation
I mean,
skills?
what are we
Like, are
doing?
you able to
What are
do
we
that?
doing right now?
I'm
No,
just
no.
there are
Look,
other ways. There are other intelligences. People look at
Yeah,
that
look,
and it's just
Jubilee,
like, oh my God, he's
welcome
so
to
smart. He
the
got his 1600
show.
or 1500.
This is the point of the show, girl. Like,
Right.
you don't get upset about talking about the exact topic that we're talking about, which is saying the American
I am not
system is
upset.
using.
Don't
Yeah, you are.
No.
You're saying I'm pissed off that this is just one metric, and I'm saying this is what America is using to assess the intelligence of this country and of
That's
the
great.
world
So
to get
one,
into the most
let me
prestigious
clarify.
colleges.
It's
So
I-
what we've got to do
It's one.
is shift and say
I
that
am
doesn't work.
Yes,
What
but
should
listen,
we be
don't do
doing
the angry
instead?
black woman thing to me. Okay. I
Mm.
have an opinion, and that's what happens when black women speak up and suddenly we're angry.
Y'all call
upset.
me angry, and I get called angry.
I'm
and
talking
rude
about me. But
every
you're not a black
episode
woman.
by
So you
somebody
don't-
watching.
again, I'm a
Okay.
black woman.
Oh,
I'm speaking from that place. You don't have the same experience as me as a black woman in the world who elevates her voice and automatically gets pinned or pigeonholed into being angry black woman angry. No,
I don't
the
get pigeonholed as
passionate-
being angry. I get pulled
no.
out
Omar
with the
said
gun.
I'm angry that I was angry. That's what I'm saying. I'm not angry. I just don't have the same, passion around this whole 1600. I don't have. It's not as high on my radar in terms of what intelligence is and what it measures. I have a different philosophical belief about what intelligence is. I think that is one type of intelligence. I think, have you ever listened to Jacob, what's his name, Collier, that has perfect pitch and is able to play every single note and identify 3 chords at the same time, like minor and major notes? That is a form of intelligence.
And that's
And I
beautiful.
get
If
it.
he's applying to Berkeley Music School, That's incredible. And
My
he can
point.
put and he can put, but he can put that on his resume, on his application for Harvard. He can put that on his because that's only one thing is what we agree with you.
That is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you say somebody is smart because they have a high level on a SAT, I think they're probably a good test taker, and they had some strong instruction throughout their life. Right? I define smart and intelligence differently. That's what I'm saying. I have a philosophical difference of opinion it comes to that. So that is why.
And we're about to close up, so I kind of want to shift the conversation.
It just got good.
What should be? No, man, because I want to continue into this.
Start with this energy.
I love starting with this energy, but that's the whole point of the damn show is to get into this, man. You can't start off at the highest decibel levels like this one Jacob guy. You got to start out chill and calm and then move the roller coaster up. That's entertainment, baby.
People ain't got time, man. People got to bring that.
Thank you, Nicole.
Here's what I'm getting at. Nicole brought up a really good point about the monarchy. And I got to say this. If America has been ruled by the rich, and then this experiment was brought in to say, what if we brought in really intelligent people to kind of start replacing just the rich as decision makers in this country? And now what we're saying is, look, no matter what, Nicole, someone's going to rule this country and someone's going to rule this world. Right? There ain't no other way around it. Like, I mean, I'd love to have a free-based communist society where everyone's not having estranged labor and shit. But like the way humans work is that there are those that will lead and there will those that will follow, and the leaders will always take it upon themselves to lead. The question is, will they lead in their own self-interest, or will they lead to help, the country and others become better? And in that conversation, there must be a replacement to say, if this meritocracy system that got set up is not fair, if we should be judging people's intelligence way more on a holistic range of things and not just an SAT, the question becomes, all right, what do we replace it with? Because this is the system that currently exists.
And they tried to take it out again.
And then they put it back in.
There were people that agree with what Jubilee said, and they took it out. They took it out for some years, and they said, we don't have a standard measure to be able to. So it's like, my thing is this. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that, with what Jubilee said. I agree with that. My thing is, if we so smart, even since No Child Left Behind and they was talking about standardized tests and how much they hated Bush, cool. Make a new one. Make one that's not biased. Make one that does measure these other things. But they have done a better job. And I will say, it's like there's a system. It's like one is academics, one is your community service, one is like how hard you work, one is this, one is that. Like it's a whole thing that goes into the pot. That's why the Asian people sued, because they thought black people was getting all their spots, which they weren't. But it's like, y'all took these standards away, and now you're just kind of picking people kind of willy-nilly or whatever. Like, my heart don't necessarily go out for them like that. You get me? But
they excel in that kind of assessment.
You said what?
I said because they excel in those kinds of assessments.
I can't be mad at somebody excelling in the assessment.
I'm not mad at it either.
Let me just finish what I'm saying. I can't get mad at you excelling in that type of assessment when I told you this is what I'm judging you on. When they got here, since their kid was in kindergarten, they said, these are the things that matter. This is what matters. And again, I'm black. Like, you feel me? So like, when it's like, y'all anger is targeted at the wrong people. You should be mad at these legacy people getting in more so than a few black people or brown people or whatever getting in, right? Or in Malcolm Gladwell's new book, the way that they build these other programs, and Harvard was mentioned again, they build expensive sports programs that only certain people can take advantage of. So the tennis team has X amount of people. Well, the white girl on the tennis team don't have to be smart or nothing because she's really, really good at tennis. Here's the thing. The whatever we say, whatever good, pure idea we say, there's gonna be unintended consequences. That sports loop, that club loop, that was to help people that didn't have all those things, but they excelled in these other places. And then they found a way to rig that. So it's like, I think calling the thing, and I actually think the four of us are actually really agreeing. My call to action is saying, David Brooks, you smart as shit, and this is a great article that's going to get clicks from the people that already like you, and they're going to fuck with you anyway. Why don't you really shake it up and actually build something that's actually better and let's try it out. And guess what? It might fail. It might fail like this other thing did. But if we don't start introducing new ideas and new ways of doing things, then we just gonna keep complaining about it. And it's just and people gonna like they're gonna pay us a mind, and then they just gonna go back to doing what they were doing. Listen, the same people that paid thousands of dollars to get their kids illegally into these schools. Varsity Blues was a real thing, you know. So
I don't think we need to be taking stuff necessarily away. I think that's an easy non-solution. Like, let's just remove the SAT, and then what? Like, I think that's just performative. It's you're not really trying to address the issue. I agree with what Jubilee's saying. I think, I've said it before. It's like, it's an incredibly narrow focus of assessing someone's preparation for college and university and success in life. It just is. But it's what we use. And I don't think we should get rid of it. But what I do think we should do instead is use other things. Like we're talking about, redefining this thing that we call merit, right? And so I think academic assessments definitely have a place, but I think we should also look at more holistic assessments. This is like a field that's, right now it's like it's happening, right? There are new types of assessments to measure all the other kind of cognitive, intelligence-based, pieces, right? So that actually exists. It's an emerging field, and I think we should be measuring those things too, because those matter, like problem-solving skills, collaboration skills. When we think about, moving away from standardized emotional intelligence, we talk about like things like project-based learning, right? Or maybe instead of, maybe we should have some kind of a standardized metric, and there should also be a rigorous like portfolio system where you have to like demonstrate work that you've completed, projects that you've completed, and defend those things, right? Talk to people, engage with people about this. I bet the highest scores on the SAT might have difficulty in a room of their peers and professors trying to defend their project work, right? And so, I think those are things that I think about, and you're seeing a lot of this. You're seeing some movement, but I think we need to see more. I think the other thing I'll return to, and I know it's getting late, so I'll end on this. At least my closing thought is I think I love this over all of it. The idea, like my takeaway from this is, or the newest thing that I'm thinking about is this public service requirement. Right. Public service requirement. Like, how can we move back to a national public service requirement for, high school graduates, right? And college too, especially if you get government money, right? You should have to spend time working in some kind of public service capacity, because it helps you to expose you to something maybe you didn't know about before. And it helps society, right? It helps society. It's good for the public, right? And so kind of scattered my closing thoughts, but that's where I'm at. This is a very big topic. I like it. We bit off as much as we could.
I know it's a huge topic. It could be a part two. Yeah. We didn't even get to the question. Yeah. There were really good questions that he had.
Yep. So thank you for putting this together, Omar.
No worries, man. We'll get to those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to lead us in the final thoughts, or you got it, bro?
Sure, man. Yeah, I'll quickly jump in, and then you guys take us home. I think Bill said something that I want to end the show with and bring to mind. And I'm with you, Bill. Like, I understand like education is to be an academic pursuit, but I would challenge your statement on social emotional learning if it's done well. Because Roderick said, hey man, like, this has gotta be implemented with fidelity. And like, I'm with you, brother. Like, the problem is the fidelity of how some of these programs are implemented. And what I mean by that is, Bill, every job, and Doc said this, is a customer service job. Dr. Charles Cole said every job is a customer service job. And what he meant by that is that, like, we are not machines that just work with machines. We are people that must work with people. And yes, it's really important that I have literacy skills. It's really important that I have math skills. But if I'm trying to compel a group of people to do good, that is going to take a totally different skill set than my ability to read well and to do math well or to score a fucking SAT score that's high, to agree with Jubilee. I've got to be able to understand the temperature in the room, how to communicate effectively with people, how to understand how to motivate someone to do something. And if someone's like, their motivation is their job and their money, man, look, I'm with you. I'm Gen X, but that didn't work. It didn't work, man. That's why the system's falling apart in itself. There are different levels of intelligence that must be incorporated into understanding how we can work as a collective towards something better versus working individually towards the betterment of only oneself. And that is a skill set I'd love to see encouraged in our schools. And like, look, man, like, I may not be the expert on much, but I'm definitively a fucking expert on that because that's what we're doing in our schools, and it's having an incredibly positive effect. So in my statement, Bill, it can't just be about the academics anymore. We have got to figure out a very solid way of helping to teach kids and expose kids, not to just some mamby-pamby, how do we feel all the time. I get it. That's not done with fidelity, but real skill sets of how do I feel? How do I understand my feelings in a way that is constructive towards this group? How do I stand up for myself? And then how do I use that to work with others to do something that we couldn't have done alone? You do that, and you match that with David's public service system, maybe we get to a place where we're focusing on improving our lives as a collective versus just improving our lives as individuals.
Who's next? When you hosting, you got to be like, all right, you on deck, you up.
Oh yeah, man. All right, man. Well, I always let ladies in, man, because I'm gentlemen and shit. Doc, you up, and then Jubilee should close us out.
All right, cool. You said Dave is up?
No, I
man,
already
just what, man. You're up.
Oh, got you. I didn't know that was your final thought. I thought that was leading into.
Oh yeah, man. I gotta wrap my shit up.
One, I love this show. I love this type of show because these things require this type of passion, and it requires smart people and a group of smart people that honestly really get along and love each other and look out for each other. We might give each other shit, but we actually do care about each other. If we can have the tough conversations, then your university should, your education leaders should. The people that get paid to do this shit should not go in there being so friendly. They should go and fix this stuff. And I'm not, I think this, man. I would say this to the Ivies, the state schools, and everybody. All of y'all are slacking because college ain't what college used to be. And if you want to really talk about it, make universities great again, bro. Like, bring back rigor. Bring back, stop changing text because everybody's uncomfortable. Stop trying to placate to everybody's fucking feelings. Like, physics is physics, and it don't care. It doesn't matter. And I'll say this, when I work with young people or my families, or even as a social worker, I've never allowed the term fair to be used because the world is not fair. Like, while it's not fair that somebody can excel in SAT and I can take as many classes and never get over the 1100 or whatever, it also ain't fair that, my grandmother never had any of the opportunities that I need to have. So you know what? It sucks that I had to write this sad-ass letter about my life and make people feel bad, but she never made more than $25,000 a year in her life. And I've been able to get, I don't need fair. I just need a chance. Get me in the door. If it's a state school, I'm going to get in that thing. And if they close the front, I'm going through the back. And I think that's where it's like the world owes you nothing. And that's just how I have to move through life. I'm not mad at people advocate that the world owes me something, but I have to have the mindset for myself in order to build what I need to build, in order to get out them shelters, in order to do what I need to do for my community and my people and the people that I love. I got to think that the world don't owe me shit. And the only way I'm going to get it is by outworking everybody else. And sometimes that requires me to work 3 or 4 times harder, which I'm happy to do, because if I have kids or if I marry somebody with kids, I guess who's going to have it a lot easier? Those kids, right? And so I think that we got to continue this conversation, and we got to put pressure on those people that get paid way more money to have these discussions, to have the fucking discussion. Stop playing nice. And what's going to get us back on track in ways that you satisfy a bunch of different things. That would be my piece.
Yeah, man, you should have this big banner that says the world is yours, like Scarface had.
But that's the type of shit I always been on. I couldn't have started a company thinking any other way. I would have failed. If I went in feeling owed something, my quality wouldn't have been good. Like, I got to be an asshole in those negotiations. David sees it. I have to be a dick in some of these meetings where it's like, nah, man, I'm not compromising that, because my scholarship and what I do after this, it matters if I change this because you wanted that change, and it's all love. But anyway, our matriarch will take us out. We do love you, and I do apologize if you felt that we targeted and put anger on you when it wasn't there. Even though you put emotionless, heartless on me every single episode.
You know, I thought that was gonna be just a nice, authentic.
I thought he was gonna stop. Yeah.
You see how he does, right? It's fine. I mean, listen, I don't have that much to add. Like,
I love you, Jubilee Ransom. I love you, Jubilee Ransom. I love you. I will hurt somebody in real life for you. I will truly hurt somebody for you. I will protect you with my life, and I mean that.
That's right, man.
That
Merry Christmas, everybody.
If I can't
Doc
call
will
you
cut
mad,
you.
don't call me
you.
I haven't called you emotionless for weeks. I'm working on it. I'm working on it over
David,
there.
You said she ain't called me emotionless for weeks. It's because she was gone last week. That's the only reason. We're gonna.
And I also said that the emotional intelligence has increased since I joined the show.
I
should do a survey.
It's just how you show you love me. Continue.
I absolutely.
No, that's facts. That's facts.
Listen, I know we're over time. I believe in hard work. I believe in achievement. I believe in all of those things. I know, speaking from a personal place, that I also needed access and opportunity, and I needed somebody who had their ear to the ground to look for those of us who probably are working hard. But just because people walk around saying, just work hard, pull up your bootstraps, it's like, yeah, but if no one ever sees that work, if nobody can ever be like, hey, she's hardworking, or she's learning this, or she's great at that, and nobody, right? Like, how do you step up? How do you accelerate? Like, how? And so I don't think it's the Ivy League's fault. I really don't. I think if you want to open up a school and you say these are your criteria and that's that, then that's that. I just think when we talk about meritocracy, that was designed for a certain group of people to say us four and no more. Right. And I just don't think that that's how we're going to move forward as a country and improve these dwindling college enrollment numbers and everything else that's going wrong. So I just feel like if we're going to limit meritocracy, then let's talk about shifting from only highlighting individual achievement to creating equitable opportunity and access points for all. Right. Meritocracy can exist in a world that does not care about DEIA. And that's currently our world.
Hey, man, on behalf of the South Star Classroom, to your families, to our audience, we want to wish you the happiest of holidays, whatever you may be celebrating. We love you. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back with you in the new year. Doc's going to have some content for you all because the man is the master of content. Look at them lasers, man. Contenting it out over the next 2 weeks.
You know what I would say? Because we have some fans here and also thank y'all for the comments. They love this one. I would say this, whether it's Nicole, whether it's Bill, Roderick, whether it is Toya, you know what? The team is taking off for the next 2 weeks, but I'm going to be here. And if any of y'all want to come and sit in these spaces where you get to be the ones being heard, Bill, you might not be able to do it because I just can't lose my livelihood for you. But if y'all want to do it, reach out to me and I will put together a show where y'all are my co-hosts. How about that? Why the team?
I love that.
Let's do that. So
can we also ask them what topics they want us to cover in the new year? Can we ask them?
And what you just did, Jubilee, go ahead.
Yeah. Can y'all also just drop it in the chat and let us know I love these balloons. What topics y'all want us to touch on in the new year? We would love to hear your thoughts and your contributions.
Y'all have a beautiful one, man. I appreciate y'all. And if this was our last show of the year, this is a hell of a way to go out. And I really think that we killed it today. Omar, get ready to plan part 2 of this so we can actually have this deep, intelligent conversation. And maybe let's see if we can find somebody that works in admissions in one of those places to join us.
That'd be dope.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to close us out. Y'all have a good one. Omar.
Bravo, Omar.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to WickDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called WickDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the WickDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.